start this session around, is it a risk to be compliant? Okay, a bit provocative, but that's meant to be. We'll see if we can do anything about this. First, I'm not going to give you my biography. Nobody cares about it. Just 3 aspects of my personality, maybe. I'm French. That's why we're in France as well. This means I'm rude and arrogant, probably, right? So that being said, now we can go forward. You know a bit more about me. I like wine, as many French people, and I have been in risk management for 15 years, more or less, right? And I like pool. In the 16th year, I wouldn't be able to use the image for pool because there's only 15 balls on pool, right? Okay. So where do we start when it goes to compliance? Of course, we have a number of boring stuff. I'll go through it very quickly. But there are some definitions which I believe are quite interesting. If you Google compliance on your computer, you'll find that definition, the action or fact of complying with a wish or command. Usually wishes don't happen, right? So why would you comply with a wish? First thing, and that's in the mind of the people usually, right? Second definition I've used, so the Cambridge English Dictionary, so something very, very serious. The act of obeying an order, a rule or request. The state of being too willing to do what other people want you to do. An order. Who likes orders? I don't. And I'm sure you don't like orders. Rules. Okay, rules, you can maybe apply some rules. A request, that's a bit softer than an order, but it's still somebody else asking you to do something, right? What other people want you to do. Sometimes you think, well, who's the expert here? Is it me? Is it you? Why are you asking me to do something? So we'll dive a little bit into this, right? And of course, ISO 19600, so it's compliance management system standard, and we have something which is a bit more abrupt, meeting all the organization's compliance obligations, right? Very, very broad. We're not sure what's in there, what goes into there, and what doesn't go into there. So we have to go further in the analysis, okay? That's a really boring one, but it's a good list of a number of standards existing around the world. So the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, the US Federal Sentencing Guideline, UK Bribery Act, the British Standard on Anti-Bribery, Italian, Australian, German standards. A number of companies have pushed for a number of standards. Countries have been quite good in developing many, many standards. And a number of them have been applied, probably regularly, in a number of countries and enterprise, but we'll see how they do that. So standards, and you have initiatives. ICC rules, OECD, United Nations, OSEG. So the fourth one, I like the fourth one, the Red Book. It's one of the only ones talking about governance, really helping you to set up your governance within the company. That's, to me at least, very useful. The COSO is more related to internal controls and risk management. Now, enough of that. Okay. So what is compliance? Compliance to what? That's one of the main questions. Okay, international standards, definitions, company rules, personal standards. This is just probably a summary of the previous slides. Before we dive into the discussion, hopefully we'll have some discussion. I'd like you to listen to something. So we're going to play this. Hopefully it's going to work. If not, we'll have somebody from Technique helping us. But we tested and it was quite okay. So let's see how Maybe a bit long, right? It's about 3 minutes or so, but it gives you the tone of what we're going to look at. Does it sound familiar to some of you? Okay, it's one specific aspect more around data, but have you seen some of these aspects already in companies? Yes, you have. Okay, good. Okay. Different. I'd like you to raise your hands with the first question first. If you think your company you're operating in is compliant today. Wow. There's only 3 of you thinking your company is compliant. Okay. Second question. Raise your hand if you think your company you're operating in is compliant, taking into account the past 10 years of operations. Nobody's raising his hands, right? So this is why you're here. You want to better understand why. We'll try to go through that. Usually I have a bit more raising hands on the first question, but some people are probably shy. You don't want to be. I'm not keeping notes of anybody. I'm not linked to FDA or whatever, so I'm not giving your names. Right. Globalization of economies. This is a bit provocative as well, but you probably have seen that sometimes. The more you're compliant, the more incompliant economies are growing as they attract uncomplicated business and entrepreneurs. If it's too complex for you to do business somewhere, you may try to do business somewhere else where it's less complicated, right? We have seen this. And we do it because it's less expensive as well. So some industry leaders are using intermediaries, as we see here. These intermediaries are quite small. They don't follow the same obligations as you have to follow. They are less in scope than you are. So it's easy to use them, right? I call this, yes, compliance hope. So you haven't raised your hands too much because you probably hope your company is compliant. Until we find the company is not compliant. Okay, then we have to make some decisions. So I've put here 2 major companies. LafargeHolcim, extremely famous cement company that merged between a French organization and a Swiss organization, LafargeHolcim. And like a few weeks after the merger, in the press, this is what we found. They've been charged with complicity in Syria crimes against humanity by giving money to ISIS. They wanted to keep their operations in Syria. The only way to do that was to give money to ISIS. That came just after the merger. You can imagine the nightmare and the earthquake within the company at this time. Another well-known company, 2 well-known companies, Shell and Eni, right? Well-respected companies as well. We like them, good reputation. No? Corruption case in Nigeria, 1.3 billion in bribery for oil fields. So this is why I'm saying, well, we know these companies, we trust them, we buy petrol from them, we buy cement for our houses, and in the end, we found out this. We're not very happy with that, okay? I'm being a bit cynical, but there are other aspects as well. So compliance hope, that's probably one of the last examples I give here. Wells Fargo, one of the largest, of course, organizations in the US, $1 billion fine. That's a fine. Some people dream of having a turnover of $1 billion. They are paying a fine of $1 billion. Can you imagine how much money it is and what we can do with that? What we should do with $1 billion to maybe develop companies, employ people, employ compliance officers before the shit happens? JP Morgan. So that's after the fact. Of course, you know JP Morgan. They have spent $4 billion in compliance and risks after the disaster. How much would have been spent if they had done it before? So it's a bit small, so sorry about this. Usually I check a bit better than that. But they say it's 1.5 billion in managing risk and compliance. Okay, the 2.5 billion is reserved for litigation. They just lost money, right? Doesn't make sense to me. So we have to push management and organization to think before things happen. And of course, you're not liable yourself for things that have happened in the past. So it's a new start from disasters that we can see. Okay. Natural fears. Okay, some people pretend they are surprised. Oh, what? We're not compliant? I didn't know. But the guy signed, a few papers. Of course, you can't say you're responsible for the disaster. It's all discovered at some point in time. At some point in time. People wish they are not in the company anymore when we discover that. That's what they hope. We are reactive, we're not proactive. Absolutely clear on compliance still. We are not challenging senior management. Well, we know why. That's the last sentence. If I talk, I lose my job. I gave my life to this company. Why should I say something about, why should I talk about this fraud? Because what's going to happen is going to be on me. So we think before finding out that we don't want to tell about non-compliances. It's tricky. I'm not saying we have to do it or we don't do it. It's a tricky question that everybody has to ask himself. The problem is when something happens, it's not just for the company. It's also very, very personal. Usually people don't like this slide because it's talking about us. It's talking about personal aspects, personal consequences. So people go to prison. You don't want to go to prison. You don't want your boss to go to prison. I mean, he has been hired you, have a good relationship. He goes to prison. You don't want him to go to prison. You want to go to prison yourself. But that's not just it. We know there are, knock-on effects, domino effects about these type of consequences about compliance. You may have to refund money to the organization. Divorce, maybe, if you're married, You've done something bad, you never told your wife. Well, if your wife is part of it, well, she goes to prison as well. You're destroying family, right? Suicide, okay, ugly word, ugly word. All these ones are ugly words. You don't want this to happen. You don't want this to happen. Why am I saying that? I'll say it here. So consequences on individuals. The question is it unfightable? I do what I want. Don't tell me what I should do when it comes to compliance. Usually, employees don't care about companies' money. The company will be up anyway. They'll ask for money from the banks. They'll increase the margin. They'll reduce the cost. The company will be able to pay the fines usually. Okay? You need to put the people in positions where they remember how they feel when they feel bad. It's really about the human factor. Once it happens, then you lose everything. You really lose everything. So the guys are like, nah, it won't happen to me. Okay, let's take it this way. It won't happen to you. If it does happen, what do you think will happen? Because then it's not a matter of probability or likelihood or frequency or whatever it is. And these guys in the middle here know what I'm talking about. If it happens, it's going to strike you. It's on you. It's not on the others, it's on you. Think twice. So we have to stop fighting the causes of risk. We usually master them. We have to work on human behavior. That's one key message. We know the causes of bribery, of corruption, of non-compliance. We know them. We know why people don't comply. So we have to work on the personal aspect. If you do not comply, this is what is going to happen. And you don't want it. Okay, compliance is a man-made disaster. So again, it's about human being. So we have two people here, and we'll have a little discussion between these two. So we have Marie and John. And Marie is a legal person. She finds out there is a new legislation, a new local legislation. Then she begins to think, aha, shall I implement this new legislation? So she begins to interpret this new legislation. Okay, there's a difference between what you read and what you understand. Always, we interpret things. Okay. Second step, she's going to call John, saying, "John, please implement. It's urgent." Right. So John's reaction is around, okay, let's see what it's about. He says, "Ooh, it's urgent. I have already too many jobs to do. What does she want from me?" It's a lady asking, this is why he's not happy. So you see there's the little icons, it's blah, 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 it goes across. But then he thinks again, okay, it's my boss. Let's think about what can I do with that. So he reads the legislation, he interprets it in his own way, okay? And then he's probably creating something not aligned with what Marie wanted, because she has her own interpretation, and he doesn't fully maybe understand the words from that new legislation. I don't know. He's not an expert. So he creates e-learning, fluffy e-learning. They don't mean much, probably. Or inexplicit or wrongly adapted compliance policies. Because we have to vulgarize this new legislation for our guys in the company. So we have to use different words. If you use expert words, we don't get it. So we are interpreting these expert words in our own mind, in our own needs. So we have a number of interpretations. So you have probably 5 or 6 different ways of interpreting things between two people. You think, you hear, you think, you talk about it, the other person listens, try to engineer what you've just been talking about, and try to create something out of it. 5 times the information has been changed already. So we already know why some compliance are not available in some companies. Okay. Okay. That was all negative, what we talked about. There are some positive aspects of compliance. Okay. It's compliance in some ways, but I like this example. So, for the ones who are keen on Formula One races, in 2005, so there's a picture about this tire exploding. During the race test for Indianapolis, this tire exploded on Ralf Schumacher's race car. Michelin did a whole lot of analysis around this, and in the end they decided, sorry guys, we're not going to provide Michelin tires for your racing cars. That was 14 cars out of 20. Can you imagine a Formula One race with only 6 cars? Just 6, right? 750, 100 million viewers, 130,000 spectators to the race that have been told, sorry guys, there's going to be only 6 cars today. But this is what happened eventually. So the 20 cars were on the grid, the 20 cars did 1 lap, and then only 6 went through the whole race. So what's the impact of that, right? So the compliance piece here is, are we compliant to our risk appetite? So in Michelin, they decided on their risk appetite for that particular race with the incident that has happened. So let's look at the consequences. 6 months later, a year later, they realized no market loss, especially in US. Enhanced confidence in Michelin, especially in the F1 sector, okay? And the company has been seen as serious, respectful of safety, respectful of its customers. So they went from blaming Mosley, as you see, right? It was really harsh at the time, to an increased reputation. So in this little chart here, the red square is exactly when they announced they would not give the tires to the F1 race. A little glitch, just a little one. And you can see where the share price has gone. Almost at the same level. It was a bit above. So maybe when you're in compliance, you can make the most out of it for your company. It is positive to take difficult decisions. People understand if you communicate well about it. Okay, back a bit to compliance about what? Compliance risk management. So I have a view on risk management, compliance risk management. I'd like to share that with you. You have to integrate compliance risk management in the strategy of the company. Then it goes across the processes and it goes along with the growth of the company. It will help you achieve your targets. Because if you're fined, then your financial targets, you're not going to meet them, for example. Just an example. You need to manage compliance in a portfolio of compliance risks. If you look in isolation, your compliance risks, you may not be fully aware of what's going on locally or internationally. So you have a portfolio of compliance risks. Keep your head down. Of course, it's not a good thing to do. Transparency is absolutely key. If you don't talk, if you don't show, we can't manage it. Put your head in the ground, you're sure somebody will find out about something later. Okay, you can't manage things you're hiding. Okay, it's about best practices. Depending on the organizations that you're working in, exchange best practices about compliance. Call other countries. Have you been in similar cases? What have you done? Even if you're not compliant now, ask the others how they have been compliant. Okay, indicators, that's an easy one. You need to put indicators on compliance. Escalation. Whenever you find out about something, you need to inform somebody at the right time with the right information. Prioritization. Probably it's difficult for you to be compliant in everything right now. Choose what aspect of compliance you need to implement first. You can't implement all of it, right? Prioritization is key as well. Performance. Now, if you see the rating agencies, you look at these surveys from Moody's, Standards & Poor's, and all of these guys, they have included compliance in their reports. So if you want your company to have a good rating, you also have to answer to these surveys, but you have to prove you're doing it. So it's an indicator of performance. Shareholders and stakeholders are looking into that a lot more than before. Okay. A number of tools exist around the world. Transparency International. Do you know this organization? Okay. So corruption perception map. Okay. You invest in a specific country, look at the color, then you say, okay, maybe I'll hire somebody to help me in this country. Okay. It's not negative, it's just the way things are perceived, so it helps you to go forward in a specific way. Okay. You can find on the internet, I mean, every time I've put the sources, of course, you can find easily on the internet corruption, anti-corruption principles. This one is a list for state-owned enterprises. Okay, you can probably apply that also to private companies quite easily. Not detailing it, it's just a matter of a good reminder. Okay, the braves or the unconscious. The whistleblowers. Is everybody aware about whistleblowers? More or less, people calling some helpline saying something is wrong in the company. Okay, why would you do this? Well, people have really faith in compliance. And that's good. We like these people. So they call the helpline saying, there's something wrong. Okay, let's look into that. Or they want a reward. You know how much you can be rich in the US by doing this? Between 15 and 25% of the money collected can be given to the whistleblower. I think there's a limit to $10 million. Well, I'd like one, just one. That's enough, right? So it's a national sport in the US. So for the reward. Okay, jealousy. You don't like somebody else in the company, so you call the whistleblower line, the helpline, you say, well, there's something wrong. You think it's right to do it. You don't have faith in compliance. It's just your guts that tell you there is something wrong. Call the helpline. They'll tell you. They'll help you. You want a promotion, right? People do that as well. You want to be fired. That's a good way. Why? Because very often when you call the helpline, if senior management is not fully engaged in compliance, they'll say, well, this guy is preventing us from doing business. He's out. Or you're already fired. Nothing to lose anymore. Call the helpline. All these reasons are good to call the helpline. Don't prevent yourself from doing it. I hope you won't be fired, of course. But if it's the case, you've done the right thing anyway. You don't deserve to be in a company who's firing you if you have called the helpline. Right? So helplines are essential. I've been sarcastic, but it's absolutely essential. Okay. Fighters. Does it help to fight financial crime? We have been looking at only, again, we are being reactive. we are looking at the different facts. We don't look at the misbehaviors in terms of the human factor again. So we need to look at building reports on attempts. Like we do reports on hacking attempts, we should do reports on compliance, anti-corruption attempts. Okay? And then you create looking forward indicators. It's like the safety pyramid, right? The more you have incidents, the more chance you can have a fatality. The more anti-corruption attempts you have, the more chance you have to have a big case in the end. So look at the attempts instead of looking at the facts. Well, look at both. Okay. The list here is a list of indicators that you should be looking at. It's quite classic. Again, there's a lot on the internet. This one is from a strategic CFO. Right. Okay, factors and technology. Technology can drive compliance because reports will come from technology. Very often we talk a lot about financial frauds. Technology is well suited for reports. What you have to do, and that's well organized at the moment, what you have to do is probably, how can I trust my guys outside the systems, outside emails, outside SMS? So we have to go back to somewhere where we can, it's not checking the people, it's not controlling the people. We have to change the behavior of the people. Because of course they know if they do something wrong in the system, it will probably be seen. So they try to act differently. So we are in a phase where technology is quite advanced. So anti-corruption, corruption schemes and fraud schemes are now very often outside systems as well. So we have to go back to human behavior. Okay. So if you can't trust, of course, you have to control, you have to train, and you have to monitor the people somehow. Okay, timing. You want to be compliant now? Too early. Let's wait a bit. I'm going to be compliant next year. Then you wait, then it's too late. It is too late. So you really need to have plans. So what does it take to be compliant in time? Of course, money and resource. So you have company constraints. As we said, you probably can't be compliant all the time for everything. Stage your compliance elements. Stage it in time. Regulators will understand, right? We have a plan to be compliant in 6 months' time for this particular aspect, and that's fine. If you don't have a plan, no good. Okay, now of course, if I'm not compliant, what are the consequences? How bad will it be for the company? How bad will it be for me? Just reinforcing that there are personal consequences of not being compliant very often. Okay. Yeah, compliance is black and white. We've been hearing that all the time. Is it that simple? 2 examples. So compliance is a must. Okay, I've been told that, but do I really need to be compliant? So I have 2 companies here, not finger pointing, these are examples, okay? And I have figures. Can somebody tell me what are these figures about? I'll give you a few seconds. Sorry? Go for it, just shout out.
The effort they have to put in to be compliant.
To be compliant, okay. What else can it be?
Fines.
Fines? Fines about what?
Not being compliant.
Okay, not being compliant for what? What is the core business of these companies? Delivery, shipping. So where do you think they're not compliant? Okay. I'll give you a little hint. Give you a little hint. How do they deliver? Car. So? I'll give you another hint. That's in New York.
Traffic fines.
Car parking. Parking fines. Parking fines. That's every year. Right? They have chosen not to be compliant.
They incorporate the cost.
It's the cost. This is only the fine, the car fines, the truck fines. They have chosen not to be compliant. They have factored these numbers in their budgets every year because their business is to deliver on time the right product. They don't care if they pay a fine for that. $15 on the other.
The risk appetite is higher than this amount.
The risk appetite is a lot higher than this. If they don't deliver, they lose their business.
The cost of compliance is higher than the cost of non-compliance.
It could be. So they've looked into that.
This is their risk appetite.
This is their risk appetite, okay? But they have chosen, and the spokesman says it, it's the cost of doing business. So they don't care not to be compliant with these fines. Of course, they're probably compliant with many other stuff, but that's just to put the balance between where should I be compliant first? Is it really necessary to be compliant everywhere? It's probably not hurting too much anybody to be, on the pavement with the truck or being, an hour in the street instead of just 10 minutes, you didn't pay for it. Okay, you could create accidents because of that. It's possible. They have chosen not to be compliant. So I have 2-3 slides to wrap up. I haven't checked time, by the way, absolutely not. It's not too bad, I think. We have 20 minutes left. So a few minutes left. We can, of course, open then questions to the floor. So there's a number of standards that you probably know about, talking about compliance in some ways. Okay? Compliance management system, anti-bribery system, security risk management, all of these ones. They all have a link to compliance at some point in time. What I think you should remember is that there is these 4 images here. Compliance is about time. If you're not compliant today, you need to plan your compliance. When are you going to be compliant? Of course, you may have some delays. Regulators, again, can understand that. But you have to time your compliance. The second one is about balance. What is it right? Is it right to pay fines for car parking when I want to deliver my customer on time? Well, why not? It's your decision, but it has to be documented again. It's about money. Compliance doesn't come for free. Okay? You've seen JP Morgan spending $1.5 billion hiring people and implementing controls. But that was after the disaster. You did it before, you probably can cut that by 10. And a nice picture is about family. Whatever happens, if you're part of it, consequences are absolutely terrible. Terrible. You don't want that to happen to you, or to your neighbors, or to your friends in the company. Okay, so we need to take informed and risk-based decisions. Not just a decision. It has to be documented, and people have to understand what decision they're taking. That's it, guys. The end is the beginning, right? So, thank you.